The needle gleamed silver under the fluorescent lights. Claire stood 3 feet from the hospital gurney, her hand steady despite the cold spreading through her chest. The child on the bed was pale, impossibly still, watching her with eyes the color of winter frost. Behind him, the man in the charcoal suit hadn't moved in 40 seconds. She had counted. The orderly's hand trembled, the syringe catching the light wrong. Too bright, almost phosphorescent. Don't, she wanted to say, but her throat had closed. What she didn't know yet was that this moment would rewrite the laws of her world and his. 48 hours earlier, Claire Hensley had been tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. She was 31 years old, a pediatric nurse at Mercy General Hospital, and her scrubs still smelled like antiseptic and the cafeteria's burnt coffee. The shift had been long, 12 hours that felt like 20. Her feet ached inside her sneakers, and her lower back had started that familiar throb somewhere around hour 9. The apartment she returned to each night was on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator worked half the time. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. The refrigerator hummed too loud, and the radiator clanked when the heat kicked on. But the rent was manageable, and it was hers. Mostly silent, mostly empty. Her younger sister, Maya, had been gone for 6 years now. Relapsed. Overdosed in a motel room on the east side of the city. The funeral had been small. Their parents hadn't come. Claire had stood alone beside a casket that cost more than she could afford and listened to a priest who had never met Maya say words that meant nothing. She kept Maya's hospital bracelet in her locker at work, white plastic with faded ink. She didn't look at it anymore, but she knew it was there. A reminder that some people couldn't be saved, no matter how steady your hands were or how much you cared. So Claire worked, double shifts when they let her, extra weekends, holidays. It helped, in the way that exhaustion helped. When she finally collapsed into bed at night, she was too tired to think. On Thursday evening, as autumn rain blurred the city into gray watercolor outside the hospital windows, Claire stood at the nurse's station filling out discharge paperwork. The smell of bleach mixed with the faint copper tang that always lingered in pediatrics. Her fingers ached from writing. Her coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, but she drank it anyway. The clock above the desk read 11:34. She had 16 minutes left on her shift when the boy arrived. Claire noticed him first through the glass partition that separated the nurse's station from the waiting area. He sat alone in one of the plastic chairs, his legs swinging above the linoleum floor, not quite reaching the ground. His clothes were expensive, she could tell even from a distance. A tailored wool coat, dark gray, with buttons that looked like real horn. Leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. But his face was drawn, shadowed. He stared straight ahead, unblinking, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Behind him stood a man, tall, well over 6 feet, charcoal suit, perfectly pressed despite the rain outside. His posture was rigid, almost military, but there was something else beneath it, a kind of stillness that made Claire's instincts prickle. His skin was pale, not sickly pale, but luminous, like porcelain held up to moonlight. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that could have belonged to a sculpture in a museum, sharp cheekbones, a jawline that looked carved, and his eyes. Claire stopped walking. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, and they tracked her movement across the lobby with the precision of someone used to cataloging threats. She swallowed and approached slowly, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you waiting to be seen?" The man didn't answer immediately. He looked at her the way someone might examine a painting, distant, analytical. His gaze moved from her face to her badge to the stethoscope around her neck. "My son," he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, each word measured like currency. "He is unwell." Claire glanced at the boy. Up close, she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. His breathing was shallow. "What's your name?" she asked, crouching down to the boy's level. The boy's lips parted, but no sound came. The man's hand moved to the boy's shoulder, firm and protective. He does not speak. Claire kept her expression neutral. She had worked with nonverbal children before: autism, trauma, selective mutism. The reasons varied, but the approach was always the same: patience, calm. She noticed the boy's hands then. They were moving, small, precise gestures, not fidgeting, signing. Her chest tightened. She straightened slowly, reached into the pocket of her scrubs, and pulled out her phone. She typed quickly, then turned the screen toward the boy. "Can you read this?" The boy's eyes widened. Just a flicker, but she saw it. He nodded. Claire typed again. "What hurts?" His boy's hands moved. Small shapes in the air. Throat. Head. Tired. Claire nodded and looked up at the man. "He's dehydrated, possibly a viral infection. I'll get him registered and seen immediately." The man stared at her. For the first time, his expression shifted. Something like surprise flickered across his face. "You know sign language?" "Some," Claire said. "Enough." She didn't elaborate. Didn't mention the months spent in a rehab center visiting room, learning ASL, because Maya had stopped speaking after the third relapse. Didn't mention the hope that maybe, if they could just communicate, things would be different. They hadn't been. The boy tugged gently on her sleeve. His hands moved again, slower this time, making sure she saw. "Thank you." Claire smiled. It was small, reflexive, but genuine. "You're welcome." She stood and gestured toward the hallway. "Follow me. We'll get him into an exam room." The man inclined his head once, a gesture that felt strangely formal, old-fashioned. As Claire led them down the corridor, past the nurses rushing between rooms and the distant beep of monitors, she glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:47. She didn't know yet that this moment, this simple act of kindness toward a frightened child, would unravel everything she thought she understood about the world. The man behind her hadn't blinked once since she crouched down to meet his son's eyes. And the boy's skin, when she had briefly touched his wrist to check his pulse, had been cold. Not cool. Cold. Like touching marble in winter. The exam room smelled like latex and disinfectant. Claire guided the boy onto the paper-covered table, the crinkling sound loud in the small space. He climbed up without hesitation, his movements precise and oddly graceful for a child his age. She guessed he was around 8, though something about him felt older, the way he held himself, the way his eyes followed her movements with an awareness that seemed beyond his years. The man remained standing near the door, his hands clasped behind his back. He hadn't removed his coat despite the warmth of the hospital. "I'm going to take his vitals," Claire said, reaching for the blood pressure cuff hanging on the wall. "Standard procedure." The man nodded once but didn't move closer. Claire wrapped the cuff around the boy's thin arm, her fingers brushing his skin. Cold. That same unsettling coldness she'd felt in the waiting room. She frowned but said nothing, pressing the button to inflate the cuff. The Velcro rasped as she adjusted it. The boy watched her face, not the equipment. Most children watched the machines, nervous or curious. He watched her. The cuff tightened, then released with a soft hiss. The display read 90/50. Low, but not critical. She made a note on the chart. "Has he been sick long?" Claire asked, unwrapping the cuff. 3 days, the man said. "He refuses food." Claire glanced at the boy. His collarbones were visible beneath his shirt. Too prominent. When did he last eat? 2 days ago. Her head snapped up. 2 days? That's not safe for a child his age. We need to get fluids into him at minimum. The man's expression didn't change. He is particular about what he consumes. Claire's jaw tightened. Particular wasn't an excuse for starvation. She turned back to the boy, softening her tone. "Does your stomach hurt when you eat?" The boy's hands moved. "No, just don't want it." She typed on her phone. "What do you want?" The boy hesitated. His fingers hovered in the air, then dropped to his lap. He shook his head. Claire set the phone down and reached for her stethoscope. I'm going to listen to your heart, okay? The boy nodded. She pressed the cold metal to his chest, over his shirt first, then slipped her hand beneath the fabric to get a clearer sound. His skin was like ice against her palm. She had to stop herself from pulling back. The heartbeat came through, faint and slow. Too slow. She counted silently. 40 beats per minute. Her frown deepened. She moved the stethoscope to his back. Breathe in for me. The boy inhaled. Shallow. Controlled. And out? He exhaled with the same measured precision. Claire pulled the stethoscope away, draping it around her neck. Has he always had bradycardia? The Mon's gaze didn't waver. He has always been different. Different how? Fragile, the man said. Sensitive to certain substances. Like what? A pause, then metals. Claire's mind catalogued the information. Metal allergies weren't common, but they existed. Nickel, cobalt, sometimes copper. That's important to note. We'll avoid anything that might trigger a reaction. She turned back to the boy, pulling on a pair of gloves. I'm going to check your throat. Open your mouth for me. The boy obeyed. His mouth opened, revealing teeth that looked too white under the fluorescent lights. Claire reached for a tongue depressor and penlight, leaning in close. His breath didn't smell like anything. No hint of sickness, no sour tang of dehydration. Just nothing. She pressed the depressor gently against his tongue, shining the light toward the back of his throat. No redness, no swelling. His tonsils looked normal. You can close, she said, stepping back and discarding the depressor into the trash. The boy's hands moved again. Am I dying? Claire's chest tightened. She crouched down so they were eye level. No, you're not dying. You're just dehydrated and need rest. We're going to help you feel better. The boy stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. She stood and turned to the man. I'd like to start an IV, get some fluids into him. It's the fastest way to rehydrate. The man's expression hardened. No needles. Claire blinked. Excuse me? No needles, he repeated. His tone left no room for negotiation. She felt her frustration rising. Sir, your son is severely dehydrated. An IV is standard treatment. Without it, he could get worse. We will manage without, the man said. That's not how this works. The man stepped forward, just one step, but it changed the air in the room. His presence seemed to expand, filling the space with something cold and immovable. I said no, he said quietly. Claire held his gaze. She had dealt with difficult parents before, overprotective, misinformed, scared, but this felt different. There was no fear in his eyes, only certainty. Fine, she said finally, then we'll try oral rehydration. But if he doesn't improve in the next few hours, we won't have a choice. The man's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head. Acceptable. Claire turned away, grabbing a plastic cup from the counter and filling it with electrolyte solution from the small fridge in the corner. The liquid was pale blue, slightly sweet-smelling. She handed it to the boy. Sip this slowly, not too fast. The boy took the cup with both hands, staring down at the liquid. He brought it to his lips, hesitated, then took the smallest sip. His face twisted slightly, but he swallowed. Good, Claire said. Keep going, just a little at a time. The boy nodded and took another sip. Claire made a note on the chart, her pen scratching against the paper. She was about to ask another question when the door burst open. 2 men entered without knocking. Both wore dark coats. Both had the same unnaturally pale skin as the man beside her. Both moved with that same unsettling stillness. Claire's pulse quickened. Lord Alaric, the first man said. His voice was flat, emotionless. The council has issued a summons. You are to return immediately. Lord Alaric? So that was his name. Alaric didn't move. I am occupied. It was not a request, the second man said. The air in the room shifted. Claire felt it like a pressure change before a storm. The boy's hand found hers, his small fingers gripping tightly. Leave, Alaric said. His voice dropped an octave, resonating in a way that made the hairs on Claire's arms stand up. Now. The first man stepped forward. "You've been seen, in public, with a human. The Accords clearly state." "Do not lecture me on the Accords," Alaric said. The second man's gaze flicked to Claire. "She's heard too much already." Then she saw it, the glint of metal in his hand, a syringe. The liquid inside shimmered, catching the light wrong. Too bright, almost glowing. Silver. Alaric moved. One moment he was beside the door, the next he was between Claire and the men, his hand wrapped around the wrist of the one holding the syringe. There was no sound, no struggle, just a quiet, sickening snap. The man gasped, his fingers spasming open. The syringe clattered to the floor, the vial shattering. The liquid pooled across the linoleum, faintly luminescent. "Touch her," Alaric said softly, "and I will end you." The two men stepped back. Their expressions didn't change, but something in their posture shifted. Deference, or fear. They turned and left without another word. The door clicked shut. Alaric stood perfectly still, his shoulders rising and falling as if remembering to breathe. Claire stared at the shattered syringe, at the glowing liquid spreading across the floor. What just happened? Her voice came out hoarse. Alaric turned slowly. His eyes had changed. The pale gray was gone, replaced by something darker, almost red at the edges. "You should leave," he said. But Claire's gaze dropped to the boy, still holding her hand, his fingers trembling and ice-cold. "No," she said. Claire's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing them still. The boy, whose name she still didn't know, hadn't let go of her other hand. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. Alaric stood with his back to them, facing the door as if expecting another intrusion. His shoulders were rigid beneath the perfectly tailored suit. The silence stretched. Finally, Claire spoke. "What was in that syringe?" "Silver," Alaric said, without turning. Her mind raced. Silver. She thought of the way the liquid had glowed, unnatural and wrong. The way those men had moved, too fast and too silent. The way Alaric had crossed the room in less than a heartbeat. Why silver? Because it destroys us. Us. The word hung in the air like smoke. Claire looked down at the boy, at his pale skin and too slow heartbeat, at the way he hadn't flinched when those men entered, as if violence was something familiar. "You're not human," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Alaric turned then. His eyes had returned. The pale gray was gone, replaced by something darker, almost red at the edges. "You should leave," he said. But Claire's gaze dropped to the boy, still holding her hand, his fingers trembling and ice-cold. "No," she said. Claire's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing them still. The boy, whose name she still didn't know, hadn't let go of her other hand. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. Alaric stood with his back to them, facing the door as if expecting another intrusion. His shoulders were rigid beneath the perfectly tailored suit. The silence stretched. Finally, Claire spoke. "What was in that syringe?" "Silver," Alaric said, without turning. Her mind raced. Silver. She thought of the way the liquid had glowed, unnatural and wrong. The way those men had moved, too fast and too silent. The way Alaric had crossed the room in less than a heartbeat. Why silver? Because it destroys us. Us. The word hung in the air like smoke. Claire looked down at the boy, at his pale skin and too slow heartbeat, at the way he hadn't flinched when those men entered, as if violence was something familiar. "You're not human," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Alaric turned then. His eyes had returned to their original gray, but something in them remained distant, guarded. "No," he said, "we are not." Claire's breath felt shallow. Her nursing training screamed at her to rationalize, to find a medical explanation. Hypothermia, metabolic disorder, some rare condition she'd never encountered. But she'd seen him move. She'd seen his eyes change color. "What are you?" she asked. Alaric studied her for a long moment. Then he glanced at the boy, who nodded slightly. "Vampires," Alaric said. The word was clinical, matter-of-fact. My son and I are vampires. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. Claire's world tilted slightly, then righted itself. She should run. She should scream. She should call security. Instead, she looked at the boy still holding her hand and asked, "How old is he?" 8, Alaric said, physically, and actually, 67 years. The number didn't make sense. Claire's eyes traced the boy's features, the round cheeks, the small frame. He looked like any other child in her ward. He was turned as a child, Alaric continued. His voice was carefully neutral. He will remain one, forever. The weight of that word settled in Claire's chest like a stone. Forever. Never growing, never aging, trapped in a body that would never change. And you, she asked, 432 years. Claire sat down slowly in the plastic chair beside the exam table. Her legs had stopped obeying her. The boy's hand squeezed hers gently. She looked up at him. His expression was solemn, almost apologetic. Her mind catalogued everything she'd observed. The cold skin, the slow heart rate, the refusal of food, the aversion to needles, to metal, to silver. Those men, she said, they wanted to kill me. They wanted to ensure your silence, Alaric corrected, by any means necessary. Because I know what you are. Yes. Claire's throat felt tight. Why does it matter? I'm nobody, a nurse. I don't have power or influence or— You showed kindness to my son, Alaric interrupted. His gaze was steady. That makes you dangerous. How? Because kindness is leverage. Because witnesses are complications. Because the world we inhabit functions on secrecy and control. His jaw tightened. And because you are now evidence that I violated protocol. What protocol? The Accords. Treaties established centuries ago to govern interactions between our kind and yours. One such rule forbids unnecessary exposure to humans. Claire processed this. So there are laws. A system. Yes. And you broke them by bringing him here. I had no choice. He was suffering. She looked at the boy again. He still held the cup of electrolyte solution, though he hadn't taken another sip. Why doesn't he eat? Because human food provides no sustenance for us, Alaric said quietly. Then what does? You know the answer. Blood. The word tasted strange in her mouth, clinical and horrifying at once. Yes, Alaric said. Claire's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Do you kill people? No. The answer was immediate, firm. We have not hunted humans in over 2 centuries. There are other methods. Blood banks, willing donors, systems. She wanted to ask more, but the boy's hand trembled in hers. She looked down at him. His silver eyes were wide, watching her face as if waiting for judgment. What's your name? She asked softly. The boy's free hand moved. E-L-I-A. Elias, Claire repeated. He nodded. She turned back to Alaric. The men who came here, will they come back? Yes, Alaric said. Not immediately, but yes. Why? Because I refused to comply. Because I placed your life above their orders. His expression hardened. And because Counselor Vane has been seeking a reason to challenge my authority for decades. Who is Counselor Vane? A member of the council that governs our kind. He believes in the old ways, absolute secrecy, human lives as expendable variables. And you don't. Alaric was silent for a moment. I believe in restraint, in coexistence, in the Accords as they were originally written, before fear corrupted their intent. Claire stood slowly. Her training was returning, pushing past the shock. If they come back, what happens to me? They will attempt to erase you. Memory alteration if possible. Elimination if not. Her stomach turned. Can they do that? Erase memories? Some of us possess that ability. Not all. Do you? Yes. She met his gaze. Are you going to? No. Why not? Because you chose to stay, Alaric said quietly, when you could have run, when you could have called for help. You stayed because my son was afraid. His voice softened, almost imperceptibly. That deserves respect, not violation. Claire's chest tightened. She thought of Maya, of all the times she'd been helpless, watching her sister spiral, of every child she'd seen suffer. I should leave, she said. I should walk out of here and pretend this never happened. You should, Alaric agreed, but I won't. Why? Because he's scared, she gestured to Elias. And he's 8 years old. She paused. Even if he's been 8 for 67 years, he's still a child. Alaric's expression shifted. Something like surprise flickered across his features. You are choosing to help. Us, he said slowly, knowing what we are. I'm choosing to help him, Claire corrected, because that's what I do. You do not understand the risk. Then explain it to me. Alaric stepped closer. If you remain involved, the council will learn of you. They will investigate, they will test your loyalty and your discretion. He held her gaze. And if they deem you a threat, I may not be able to protect you. May not? I am a lord. I have influence. But I am not beyond the law. Claire looked at Elias. His small face was pale, exhausted. He looked like every sick child she'd ever treated, vulnerable, in need. She'd lost Maya because she couldn't save her, but maybe she could do this. I'm staying, she said. Alaric stared at her. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Then, why? His voice was barely above a whisper. Why would you risk this? Because no one should be alone, Claire said simply. Not even monsters. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Alaric's eyes widened fractionally. His jaw tightened as if she'd struck him. We are monsters, he said. Maybe, Claire said, but you're also a father trying to take care of his son. Elias's hand squeezed hers again. Alaric looked at them both. Then, slowly, he inclined his head. Very well, he said, but understand this. If you walk this path, there is no returning to your old life. Claire thought of her empty apartment, her double shifts, her silent nights. I understand, she said, and for the first time in 432 years, Alaric felt something shift in the carefully constructed walls around his heart. 3 nights later, Claire found herself standing in front of a building she'd passed 100 times, but never truly seen. The address Alaric had given her led to a high-rise in the financial district, all glass and steel and sharp angles that caught the moonlight. The lobby was marble and silence, monitored by cameras that tracked her movement from the moment she entered. A man in a dark suit appeared before she reached the elevator. He didn't speak, just gestured for her to follow. They rode to the 32nd floor in silence. The doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment that seemed to exist outside of time. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights below stretching into infinity. The furniture was minimal, modern, but the walls held tapestries that looked centuries old. A painting in the corner could have hung in a museum. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor near the windows, building something with wooden blocks. His movements were precise, methodical. He didn't look up when she entered. Alaric stood beside the glass, motionless as a statue. You didn't have to come, he said without turning. You asked me, Claire replied. I suggested. There is a difference. She approached slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. How is he? Unchanged. Claire crossed the room and crouched beside Elias. The boy glanced at her, then returned to his blocks. She realized they were arranged to form letters. T-H-A-N-K-Y-O. Her throat tightened. He doesn't get visitors, Alaric said from behind her. Not anymore. Why not? Because immortality is not a gift, Miss Hensley. It is a sentence. She looked up at him. Call me Claire, and explain what you mean. Alaric moved away from the window, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if reciting facts about someone else's life. Elias was dying. Plague. London, 1642. His mother begged me to save him. She paused. I did. And in doing so, I condemned him. Claire stood slowly. You gave him life. I gave him eternity. At 8 years old. Alaric's jaw tightened. Do you understand what that means? He will never grow.
never age, never experience adolescence, adulthood, any milestone a human child would. He is frozen. And his mother? Dead, 2 years after his transformation, burned by those who feared what we are. The weight of those words settled over the room like ash. "You've been alone since then?" Claire asked. "We do not die, Miss Hensley. We endure. Alone is simply inevitable." "That's not true." He turned to face her fully. "You believe connection is possible for creatures like us? I think connection is possible for anyone who wants it. Want is irrelevant. We are predators. You are prey. That is biology. I'm not afraid of you. You should be." Claire stepped closer, close enough to see the faint lines around his eyes, barely visible but there, evidence of an age no human could fathom. "You've spent 400 years protecting your son," she said quietly. "That's not a predator. That's a father." Something flickered across his expression. His shoulders tensed. "You do not understand what you're saying. Then help me understand." Alaric was silent for a long moment. Then he held out his hand, palm up. "Touch." Claire hesitated. Then she placed her hand in his. His skin was cold, not ice, but stone, unyielding, lifeless. But when his fingers closed around hers, the pressure was careful, controlled. "We do not feel warmth," he said, "not for centuries. We do not hunger for food. We do not tire. We do not sleep, untired."
Injured. "We do not dream." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, the gesture oddly gentle. "We exist, Miss Hensley. We do not live." "Then why protect him?" Claire asked. "Why protect me?" His eyes met hers, silver gray and ancient and tired. "Because I remember," he said quietly, "what it was like to be human." The confession hung between them, fragile as glass. "What do you remember?" Claire asked. "Warmth, laughter, the taste of bread, the ache of tired muscles after a long day." He paused. "Hope. You can still have those things." "No, we can only remember them. It is not the same." Elias tugged on Claire's sleeve. She looked down. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. "Stay?" Claire glanced at Alaric, then back at the boy. "Okay," she said softly. Elias's face transformed. It wasn't quite a smile, but something close, something that hadn't been there before. Alaric watched them both, his expression unreadable. "You should know what you're agreeing to," he said. "If you remain in our lives, the council will take notice. They will summon you, question you, assess whether you are a risk. What happens if they decide I am?" Alaric's silence was answer enough. Claire sat down on the floor beside Elias, her back against the leather couch. The boy immediately shifted closer, leaning against her shoulder. "Tell me about the council," she said. Alaric moved to the chair across from her, sitting with the rigid posture of someone who had lived through centuries of courtly etiquette. "There are 12 members," he began. "Each represents a different region, a different bloodline. They convene to interpret and enforce the accords. The treaties you mentioned. Yes, established after centuries of war between our kind and yours. They define what is forbidden, forced transformations, indiscriminate hunting, the use of silver as a weapon in neutral territories, harm to those who provide medical care." Claire absorbed this. "So there are protections. For some, not all. The accords were written by those in power to maintain power. They protect the system, not individuals. And you? I am what they call a lord. I oversee a territory, enforce the laws within it, represent my bloodline in council proceedings. So you have influence. Some, less than I once did." His gaze darkened. "Counselor Vane has been eroding my position for decades. He believes I am too lenient, too sympathetic to humans." "Are you?" Alaric looked at her. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was human once. Because I remember what it cost to lose that." His voice softened. "And because I have seen enough death to last 1,000 lifetimes.
I do not wish to add to it. Elias's hand found Claire's, his small fingers curling around hers. What will the council do? Claire asked. They will summon us, likely within the week. You will be questioned, your intentions examined. They will decide if you are an acceptable risk. And if I'm not, then they will remove you from the equation. Kill me, you mean? Or alter your memory so thoroughly that you will not remember any of this. Either way, you will be gone. Claire's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Can you stop them? I can argue on your behalf, invoke the right of sanctuary if necessary, but it would bind us. Bind us how? It would mean placing you under my protection, formally, permanently. If they harm you, they declare war on me. If you die, I am forbidden from taking another human under my care for the remainder of my existence. That's a hell of a commitment. Yes. Why would you do that for me? Alaric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Because my son trusts you, and he has not trusted anyone in 67 years. Elias looked up at Claire, his silver eyes wide and serious. She thought of Maya, of the promise she'd made at her sister's funeral, to never turn away from someone who needed help. Okay, she said. What do I need to do? Be yourself, Alaric said. Answer their questions honestly. Do not show fear. I'm terrified. Good. That means you understand the stakes. He held her gaze. But do not let them see it. Claire nodded slowly. For the first time in decades, Alaric felt something he thought he'd lost. Not hope, exactly, but its distant cousin. The summons arrived on the 5th night. Claire was at the hospital, midway through a shift, when her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. An address, a time, nothing else. She showed it to Alaric when she arrived at the penthouse 2 hours later, her scrubs still smelling like antiseptic. He read it without expression. Tomorrow night. The Undercroft beneath the old cathedral on 5th Street. I didn't know there was an Undercroft. Most don't. It has existed since the city's founding. Neutral ground. Will you be there? Yes, but I cannot speak for you. You must answer for yourself. Claire's stomach twisted, but she nodded. Elias appeared in the doorway, carrying a sketchbook. He'd started drawing recently, filling pages with careful pencil lines. He held it up to show her. The drawing depicted 3 figures, a tall man, a small boy, and a woman standing between them, all 3 holding hands. That's beautiful, Claire said softly. Elias's hands moved. Will you come? Back? After tomorrow? Yes, she signed back. I promise. The boy studied her face as if measuring the weight of that promise. Then he nodded and returned to the couch, adding details to his sketch. Alaric watched the exchange, something unreadable in his expression. You learn quickly, he said. I had a good reason to. He tilted his head slightly. Your sister. Claire stiffened. How did you know? You carry grief visibly. It is in the way you move, the way you speak to Elias. He paused. You are trying to save someone you already lost. The accuracy of it stung. Maybe, she said quietly, or maybe I'm just trying to do better this time. Alaric regarded her for a long moment. Then he gestured toward the couch. Sit. There are things you should know before tomorrow. Claire sat, and Alaric settled into the chair across from her, his posture as rigid as ever. The council will test you, he began, not with questions alone, but with presence. They are old, Miss Hensley. Some have lived for over 1,000 years. Their very existence exerts pressure. What kind of pressure? Psychological, instinctual. Humans are biologically wired to recognize predators. In a room with 12 apex beings, that instinct will scream at you to run. And I can't? No. If you show weakness, they will exploit it. Claire's hands clenched in her lap. What will they ask? Why you stayed? Why you did not report us? What you hope to gain? They will search for ulterior motives, hidden agendas. They do not understand altruism. Because they've forgotten what it looks like, Claire said. Alaric's lips twitched, almost a smile. Perhaps.
Tell me about them, the council members. Alaric leaned back, his gaze distant. Councillor Vane is the eldest, 1,200 years. He was a warlord in life, and he has never stopped seeing the world as a battlefield. He will view you as a liability. And the others? Lady Sarah oversees the Eastern Territories. She is pragmatic, calculating. She will assess you like a ledger, weighing cost against benefit. Lord Dimitri governs the northern regions. He is a scholar, more interested in history than politics, but he defers to Vane on most matters. He continued through the list. 12 names, 12 histories, 12 ancient beings who would decide her fate. When he finished, Claire exhaled slowly. No pressure. You will not be alone, Alaric said. I will be there. And while I cannot speak for you, my presence will remind them that you are under my consideration for sanctuary. What does that mean exactly? Sanctuary? It is an old law, predating the Accords. If a vampire takes a human under formal protection, that human becomes untouchable. To harm them is to declare blood feud. And you do that? For me? Alaric met her gaze. Yes. Why? Because you sat on the floor with my son and made him smile. Because you learned his language. Because you stayed when anyone rational would have run. His voice softened. Because you see him as a child, not a monster. He is a child, Claire said. To you, to them, he is an anomaly, a mistake. They would have had him destroyed decades ago if not for my intervention. The word sent ice through her veins. Destroyed? Transforming a child is forbidden under the Accords. It is considered the gravest violation. Elias exists only because the council granted me an exception, given the circumstances of his turning. What circumstances? Alaric's expression darkened. His mother was dying. Plague had taken half of London. She begged me to save him, and I complied. But the transformation was unstable. He nearly did not survive. But he did. Yes, and I have spent 67 years ensuring he remains safe. Claire looked at Elias, still sketching quietly on the couch. He seemed so small, so fragile. I won't let them hurt him, she said. Alaric's gaze sharpened. You cannot promise that. Watch me. For the first time, something like warmth flickered in his eyes. You are either very brave or very foolish, he said. Probably both. This time Alaric did smile. It was brief, barely there, but real. Elias looked up from his drawing, his silver eyes moving between them. His hands formed a question. Are you friends? Claire glanced at Alaric, then back at Elias. Yes, she signed. I think we are. Elias's face lit up. He returned to his sketchbook, but his posture had relaxed, the tension in his small shoulders easing. Alaric stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. There is something else you should know, he said quietly. Claire joined him at the glass. What? If the council grants sanctuary, you will be bound to us. Not legally, but practically. You will be marked as under my protection. Other vampires will know. It will change how you move through the world. How? You will be safe from our kind, but you will also be watched, monitored. Some will resent the protection you receive. Others will test it. Test it how? By pushing boundaries, seeing how far they can go before I intervene. His reflection in the glass was pale, ghostly. It will not be an easy life. Easier than running, Claire said. She thought of her empty apartment, her double shifts, the years since Maya's spent going through motions without purpose. Yes, she said, I'm certain. Alaric turned to face her. His expression was grave, but something in his eyes had softened. Then tomorrow we face the council. Together. Together, Claire echoed. Behind them, Elias continued to draw, adding careful shading to the figures in his sketch. The woman in the center now had a face, Claire's face, and for the first time in 67 years, the boy who would never grow up felt something he'd almost forgotten: safety. The night passed in quiet preparation. Alaric explained protocols, proper forms of address, the hierarchy within the council chambers. Claire listened, absorbing everything, her mind cataloging details the way she would for a difficult patient case. When dawn approached, Alaric retreated to a windowless room deeper in the penthouse. Elias followed, pausing only to sign goodnight to Claire. She settled on the couch, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her phone buzzed, a message from the hospital, asking if she could cover another shift next week. She stared at the screen. Her old life felt impossibly distant now, like something from another person's memory. She typed a response. "I'll let you know." Then she set the phone aside, pulled a blanket over herself, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would face beings older than nations. Tomorrow, she would defend her choice to care. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, in this moment, she was simply tired. And for the first time in 6 years, that felt like enough. The call came at 2:37 in the morning. Claire jolted awake on the penthouse couch, her phone buzzing violently against the glass coffee table. The screen showed an unknown number. She answered, her voice rough with sleep. "Hello?" Claire Hensley. The voice on the other end was male, smooth, and cold as winter steel. "You've made a very dangerous friend." Her pulse spiked. She sat up, the blanket falling away. "Who is this?" "Someone who understands the Accords better than Lord Alaric does. He has violated protocol, exposed our kind, brought you into a world where you have no place. I don't understand what you want. You have 48 hours to sever all contact with Lord Alaric and his progeny, disappear, leave the city, forget what you've seen. And if I don't, then we will sever the contact for you, permanently." The line went dead. Claire's hands shook as she pulled up Alaric's number. He answered before the first ring finished. "They called you," he said. "Not a question?" "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who was it?" "Counselor Vane, or someone acting on his orders." "What do they want?" "To isolate me, to prove I have grown weak." He paused. "You are evidence of that perceived weakness. So, they'll kill me to make a point." "They will try." Claire stood, pacing to the window. The city sprawled below, oblivious and glittering. "What do I do?" "You leave. Tonight. I will provide resources, a new identity, safe passage to another country." "No." Silence on the other end. "No?" Alaric repeated carefully. "I'm not running." "Miss Hensley?" "Claire. My name is Claire." And I said, "No." She heard him exhale, a sound he didn't need to make, but did anyway. "You do not understand what they are capable of." "Then show me." "This is not." Her apartment window exploded inward. Claire screamed, dropping the phone as glass sprayed across the room. A figure landed in a crouch on her floor, impossibly graceful, eyes gleaming red in the darkness. The vampire was tall, dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb light. When he smiled, his teeth were too white, too sharp. "Found you?" he said. Claire scrambled backward, her hand closing around the lamp on the side table. She swung it with all her strength. The vampire caught it mid-arc, his fingers crushing the ceramic base like paper. Fragments scattered across the floor. "Alaric can't protect you, human." His voice was almost amused. "You're just a distraction, a pet he'll forget in a decade." He lunged forward, inhumanly fast. Claire dove to the side, rolling behind the couch. Her nursing training kicked in, calculating exits, obstacles, anything she could use. The door was 15 feet away. She'd never make it. The vampire vaulted over the couch, landing between her and escape. Then he stopped. His body went rigid, lifted slightly off the ground. A hand gripped the back of his neck, holding him suspended like a puppet. Alaric stood behind him, fully dressed despite the hour, his eyes burning silver red in the dim light. "You are mistaken," Alaric said quietly. Then he moved. Claire didn't see the blow. One moment the attacker was there, the next he was against the wall, plaster cracking behind him. Alaric's hand remained locked around his throat, applying pressure that would have crushed a human windpipe. "Tell Vane," Alaric said, his voice lethal and controlled, "that if he touches her again,
I will invoke the old laws, the ones that predate his precious counsel. Do you understand?" The vampire nodded frantically. His bravado evaporated. Alaric released him. The man fled through the broken window without a sound, disappearing into the night. Silence
tussled over the apartment. Claire sat on the floor, her back against the couch, breathing hard. Alaric turned to face her, his expression carved from stone. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He crossed the room in 2 strides, crouching in front of her. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if approaching a frightened animal. His eyes had returned to their pale gray. "You need to leave the city, tonight." This was a warning. "The next attempt will be coordinated. What about Elias? He will come with me. And you? I will handle the council. Alone? I have done so for centuries." Claire grabbed his wrist before he could pull away. His skin was cold, unyielding beneath her fingers. "That's not an answer." He stared at the point where her hand touched him, as if the contact confused him. "Why do you care?" he asked, and for the first time since she'd met him, he sounded genuinely lost. "Because you're not alone anymore," Claire said. Something in his ancient, weary eyes cracked open, a fissure in centuries of carefully maintained control. "You do not know what you are saying," he said quietly. "Yes, I do." She tightened her grip. "You've spent 400 years carrying everything by yourself, but you don't have to anymore. The council will not stop. Vane will escalate until one of us is destroyed. Then we face them, together. They will kill you." "They'll try," Claire corrected, "but I'm harder to kill than I look." Alaric's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You are insane." "Probably, but I'm also right." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Very well. But we do this my way. No more nights alone in your apartment. You stay here, under guard, until the council convenes. When will that be?" "Tomorrow night. They have moved up the timeline." His jaw tightened. "Vane is forcing a confrontation." "Good," Claire said. "Let's give him one." Alaric stood, offering his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His grip was careful, controlled, despite the strength she knew he possessed. "Pack what you need," he said. "We leave within the hour." Claire looked around her apartment, at the broken window, the shattered lamp, the life she'd built after Maya's death. It had never felt like home. "I don't need anything," she said. Alaric's expression softened fractionally. "Then come." They left through the back entrance, moving through alleys Claire had never noticed. A car waited at the curb, dark and expensive. The driver didn't speak, didn't acknowledge her presence. The penthouse felt different when they arrived, more tense. 2 vampires she'd never seen stood guard near the elevator, their eyes tracking her movement. Elias appeared from the inner room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw Claire, his face transformed with relief. His hands moved quickly. "You're safe." "I'm safe," she signed back. He ran to her, wrapping his thin arms around her waist. She held him, feeling the unnatural coldness of his skin through his pajamas. Over his head, she met Alaric's gaze. "Tomorrow," she mouthed. He nodded once. Tomorrow they would face the council. Tomorrow Vane would make his move. Tomorrow everything would be decided. But tonight, in this moment, they were together. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. Claire spent the remaining hours before dawn on the couch with Elias curled against her side, his sketchbook open across both their laps. He drew while she watched, adding details to his collection of careful portraits. Alaric stood by the window, motionless as a statue, watching the city prepare for sunrise. When the first gray light touched the horizon, he finally moved, retreating to the windowless room. Elias followed, pausing at the threshold. His hands formed a single sign. "Thank you." "For what?" Claire signed back. "For staying." The door closed, leaving her alone with the guards who pretended not to see her. Claire pulled out her phone and typed a message to the hospital. "Family emergency. Need to take personal leave." She hit send before she could reconsider.
Then she settled back against the couch, closed her eyes, and waited for night to fall. The council convened in a place that shouldn't exist. Claire descended stone steps that spiraled deep beneath the old cathedral on 5th Street, each footfall echoing in the narrow passage. Alaric walked beside her, his hand hovering near her elbow without quite touching. Behind them, Elias moved silently, his small hand gripping the back of Claire's jacket. The air grew colder with each step, damper. It smelled of earth and age, and something else she couldn't name. At the bottom, massive iron doors stood open, revealing a chamber carved from living rock. 12 figures sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. Candles burned in sconces along the walls, their flames perfectly still despite the lack of ventilation. The light cast long shadows that seemed to move independently. Claire's instincts screamed at her to run. She forced herself to keep walking. The figures watched her approach with eyes that reflected the color light in colors no human eye should produce: silver, gold, deep crimson, black as coal.
"Ill, Lord Alaric," a voice said from the center chair. The speaker was a man who looked perhaps 40, with dark hair and features that might have been carved from marble. His eyes were completely black. "You bring the human before us." "Councillor Vane," Alaric said, his tone formal, "I present Claire Hensley under my consideration for the right of sanctuary." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vane leaned forward slightly. "Sanctuary. A bold claim for a woman you have known less than a fortnight." "She saved my son's life," Alaric replied. "Your son," Vane said, "should not exist." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Yet he does," Alaric said quietly, "by the grace of this council. And he lives because Miss Hensley acted with compassion when others would have turned away." "Compassion," a woman's voice said from the left. Lady Sarah was beautiful in the way of predatory birds, sharp-featured and golden-eyed. An interesting defense. "Tell me, human, do you understand what you have seen?" Claire's throat was dry, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes." "And what have you seen?" "Vampires. A society that exists parallel to humanity, laws that govern both." Sarah's expression didn't change. "You do not seem afraid." "I am afraid," Claire said. "I'd be stupid not to be. But fear doesn't change what's right." "And what is right?" Vane asked, his voice like silk over steel. "Helping a sick child, regardless of what he is." "He is not a child," Vane said. "He is an abomination, a violation of our most sacred laws." "He's 8 years old," Claire countered. "He didn't choose this." "Neither did the plague victims his transformation endangered. Neither did the humans who witnessed his instability in those early years." Vane's black eyes fixed on her. "Lord Alaric cleaned up those complications personally. Did he tell you that?" Claire glanced at Alaric. His expression remained impassive, but she saw the tension in his jaw. "No," she said, "he didn't." "Because he is ashamed," Vane continued, "as he should be. And now he compounds his mistakes by exposing our existence to yet another human." "I haven't told anyone," Claire said. "Yet," Vane replied. "But you will grow old. You will need care. You will lose control of your faculties. And in your decline, you will speak of what you have seen." "Then alter my memory when that time comes," Claire said, "but not before." Silence fell over the chamber. "You would consent to memory alteration?" Lady Sarah asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "If it protects them, yes." Alaric's head turned sharply toward her. "You cannot agree to that." "Why not?" Claire met his gaze. "You said yourself that's one of the options." "It is a violation," Alaric said, his voice tight. "It's a choice," Claire corrected. "My choice." Vane stood, his movements fluid and precise. "How noble. The human offers herself as a sacrifice." He circled behind his chair, his fingers trailing along the carved wood. "But I wonder, Miss Hensley, what you truly want from this arrangement." "I want Elias to be safe." "Nothing else?" "Nothing else." "You do not seek immortality, power,
protection from the mundane dangers of your short life? No, Claire said firmly. Vane smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Then you are either lying or deluded. I'm neither. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air. Vane gestured, and 2 vampires emerged from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Between them, they dragged a man, human, unconscious and bleeding from a wound on his temple. This man attacked one of our sanctuaries, Vane said. By our laws, his life is forfeit. He turned to Claire. Kill him. Her blood went cold. What? You claim to understand our world. Prove you can stomach its realities. Kill him, and we will grant sanctuary. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm a nurse. I save lives. I don't take them. Even when it serves the greater good? Even when it protects the child you claim to care for? She looked at the unconscious man, at the blood matting his hair, at his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. No, she said. Vane's smile widened. Then you are useless to us. She is human, Alaric said, his voice cutting through the chamber. You are asking her to violate the core of her nature. That is not a test. That is cruelty. It is necessity, Vane countered. If she cannot make hard choices, she is a liability. Claire stepped forward. I'll do it. Alaric's hand caught her arm. No. She met his eyes. If it keeps Elias safe? It does not, Alaric said firmly. Vane is manipulating you. The man is already sentenced. Your participation changes nothing except to stain you with guilt. He turned to face the council. I invoke the right of sanctuary. Formally, by the old laws, Claire Hensley is under my protection. To harm her is to declare war on my bloodline. Vane's expression darkened. You would bind yourself to a mortal? Permanently? I would. She will age, wither, die, and you will be bound to honor her memory for eternity, unable to take another ward, unable to claim another protege. He stepped closer. Is she truly worth that? Alaric's jaw tightened. Yes. The word resonated through the chamber. Vane turned to Claire. And you? Do you accept this bond, knowing it chains him as much as it protects you? Claire looked at Elias, standing small and silent beside Alaric. The boy's silver eyes were wide, afraid. She thought of Maya, of all the times she'd been helpless. Not this time. I accept, she said. Vane's expression twisted. Then you are both fools. He gestured sharply. The guards released the unconscious man, who crumpled to the floor. By the laws of sanctuary, I cannot touch you, Vane said. But know this, Miss Hensley. You have made an enemy tonight. I can live with that, Claire said. Can you? The question lingered as Vane returned to his seat. Lady Sarah spoke into the silence. The sanctuary is witnessed. Let it be recorded. One by one, the other council members nodded. Vane remained motionless, his black eyes fixed on Claire with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. This council is adjourned, he said finally. The candles flickered. Elias's hand found Claire's elbow, guiding her toward the stairs. Elias pressed close to her other side. They climbed in silence, leaving the chamber and its ancient occupants behind. Outside, the night air felt impossibly fresh. Claire's legs trembled, adrenaline finally patching up to her. You did not have to do that, Alaric said quietly. Yes, I did, Claire replied. Why? She looked down at Elias, then back at Alaric. Because family protects each other. Alaric stared at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, something in his expression broke. The centuries of control, the carefully maintained distance. Thank you, he said, his voice barely audible. Claire reached out and took his hand. His skin was cold, but his fingers closed around hers with surprising warmth. Together, they walked back toward the car. Behind them, in the undercroft beneath the cathedral, Vane watched from the shadows. And he smiled. 6 months later, the penthouse had changed. String lights hung across the living room, tiny, warm bulbs that Claire had insisted on installing. They glowed softly in the evening, casting gentle shadows that softened the sharp angles of the modern furniture. Elias had requested them, after seeing them in a store window, his hands moving excitedly to describe how they reminded him of stars. Now they burned every night. Claire stood in the kitchen making tea, a ritual she'd maintained from her old life. The kettle whistled softly. She poured the water over chamomile leaves, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. "You still do not have to do that," Alaric said from behind her. She didn't turn. "I know, but I like it." He appeared beside her, silent as always. His presence had become familiar over the months. Comfortable. He no longer maintained the careful distance he once had. "The council approved the motion," he said quietly. Claire looked up. "Which one?" "The amendment protecting human medical personnel. They cannot be harmed for knowledge gained in the course of their duties." He paused. "It passed unanimously." "Because of what happened?" "Because of you." Alaric's expression softened. "Your testimony before the council. Your willingness to stand as witness. It changed perspectives." Claire cupped the warm mug in her hands. "That's significant." "It is a beginning," he said. "Other protections will follow. Gradually. But it is progress." She smiled. "You sound almost hopeful." "Perhaps I am." Elias appeared in the doorway, holding up a piece of paper. His latest drawing. Claire crouched down to see it properly. The sketch showed 3 figures standing together beneath string lights. A tall man in a dark suit, a small boy with careful eyes, a woman in the center, holding both their hands. Underneath, in precise letters, family. Claire's throat tightened. "It's perfect, Elias." The boy smiled, then wrapped his arms around her waist in a fierce hug. She held him, no longer startled by the coldness of his skin. It was simply part of who he was. Over his head, she met Alaric's gaze. Something had shifted between them over the months. The formality had eroded, replaced by something quieter, deeper. They moved around each other with an ease that spoke of trust built through small moments, shared silences, conversations that stretched into dawn. Elias sleeping peacefully between them while they watched the city lights. "You were right," Alaric said softly. "About what?" "No one should be alone." Claire scud, Elias still clinging to her side. "Are you? Still?" Alaric looked at them both. At the string lights casting warm shadows. At the drawings taped to the walls. "No," he said. "I am not." The words carried weight. 432 years of solitude, ended by the simple choice to let someone in. Elias tugged on Claire's hand, pulling her toward the couch where his coloring supplies were scattered. She let herself be led, settling into the cushions while he climbed up beside her. Alaric remained standing for a moment, watching them. Then he moved to sit in the chair across from them, close enough to be part of the circle. Claire picked up a colored pencil. "What are we drawing tonight?" Elias's hands moved. The park, with the ducks. They had started going to the park after dark, when it was empty. Elias liked to watch the ducks sleeping on the pond, their heads tucked beneath their wings. He'd never seen them awake, in daylight, but he sketched them with careful attention to every feather. "Show me," Claire signed. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to draw. Claire watched his small hands move with impossible precision, creating shapes that would have taken her hours. Alaric leaned back in his chair, his posture finally relaxed. The rigid formality he'd maintained for centuries had softened. He looked younger somehow, less burdened. "The hospital called today," Claire said after a while. "They want me back full time." "Will you go?" "I don't know." She set down her pencil. "I told them I'd think about it." "You miss it," Alaric observed. "Parts of it," she admitted. "Helping people, making a difference. You make a difference here." "It's not the same." Alaric was quiet for a moment. Then, what if there was another option? She looked up. "What do you mean?" "The council has proposed establishing a medical facility.
specifically for situations involving both humans and our kind. Neutral ground, staffed by those who understand both worlds. He met her gaze. They have asked if you would consider leading it. Claire's breath caught. A hospital? More of a clinic. Small, discreet, but fully equipped. You would train others, develop protocols, bridge the gap between our species in a way that has never been done. That's incredible. It is also dangerous. You would be working with those who may not trust humans, who may test boundaries. I can handle that. Alaric's lips twitched. I know. Elias looked up from his drawing, his hands moving quickly. Does this mean you're staying? Forever? Claire glanced at Alaric, then back at the boy. Yes, I'm staying. Elias's face transformed. He launched himself at her, wrapping his arms around her neck. She caught him, holding tight. Over his shoulder, she saw Alaric's expression. Something raw and unguarded flickered across his features before he composed himself. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For choosing us. The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Claire set Elias down gently. The boy returned to his drawing, adding details to the ducks with renewed energy. She stood and crossed to where Alaric sat. He looked up at her, centuries of weariness visible in his eyes. I didn't choose you because I had to, she said softly. I chose you because I wanted to. Why? Because you needed someone to say yes. Because Elias deserved to smile. Because immortality shouldn't mean being alone. She paused. Because you're worth it. Alaric stood slowly. They were close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the only visible sign of his true age. I do not deserve you, he said. You don't get to decide that. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, not quite touching. May I? She nodded. His fingers brushed her cheek, cold but gentle. The touch lasted only a moment before he pulled back. Thank you, he said again, for everything. You've already thanked me. It bears repeating. Elias appeared beside them, holding up his finished drawing. 3 ducks on a pond, sleeping peacefully beneath a moon rendered in silver pencil. Beautiful, Claire signed. Like us, Elias signed back. Safe. Claire's eyes burned. She crouched down and pulled him into another hug. Yes, she whispered, like us. That night, after Elias had retreated to his room and the string lights cast their warm glow across the empty living room, Claire and Alaric stayed by the windows overlooking the city. It's strange, Claire said. 6 months ago, I didn't know any of this existed. And now I can't imagine going back. You gave up your old life for this. I gained a new one. Alaric turned to face her. I cannot offer you immortality. That choice is yours alone, and I would never. I'm not asking for that, Claire interrupted. I'm asking for this, what we have now. And when you age, when time takes its toll, then you'll remember me. That's enough. It is not enough, Alaric said, his voice tight. But it is what we have. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers automatically. 400 years, she said. You've been alone for 400 years. Yes, not anymore.
No, he agreed quietly. Not anymore.
They stood in silence, watching the city lights blur into patterns. Somewhere below, the human world continued, oblivious to the ancient beings who walked among them. But here, in this space between worlds, something new had been built. Not a cure for immortality's curse, not an escape from time's weight, just a small, fragile thing called family. And for now, impossibly, it was enough. In his room, Elias added one final drawing to his collection. 3 figures beneath string lights, holding hands, with a single word written beneath, in careful script. Home. He set down his pencil and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. For the first time in 67 years, sleep came easily. Outside his door, Claire and Alaric remained by the window, neither speaking, neither needing to. The night stretched on, vast, endless, and no longer quite so cold.